What is going on, y'all? I'm KM Best. Welcome to this very special episode of 8 Cubes. It's very special because we have BYNX filling in for Lambie series. BYNX back on 8 Cubes, I believe, for the second time. Welcome to the show. The way we
Third time.
typically do things here is we talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap for the week. We're going to start out with Hulkling. Glad to have you here. Throwing you Hulkling 611 has the text of a random 6 drop. Where do you see that card landing?
I think it could be okay. I think that it's more a fun card than anything. Anytime you look at a card like this, where it's very random,
Mhm.
what the actual additional effect you're going to be getting. What I feel like we've seen in the past is that if those cards have fully premium stats,
Mhm.
they can be pretty devastating. You see like Nico that had, it's random which of the effects you get, but they're all pretty good. Copycat, where you get kind of a random effect and some disruption, some information, but it's a 3/5. So 611 is that it's powerful enough. It's not 612, it's not like 613. It's strong, but like if you get kind of a stinker of a play, it's not like Mockingbird where you can get it out for cheaper, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just getting 11 power out of this pretty consistently, then it's going to probably fall kind of flat. I'm excited to run it in ramp decks, so I think that ramp decks are a very fun way that you can kind of just throw this in, because it's just a deck that likes to throw a bunch of giant cards out, and maybe getting like a super super high powered one off of this could be really good. But I don't know. I consider it more fun tier. I think it's gonna have a really hard time falling into a very high level deck. How about you?
So one of the things that really strikes me about Wiccan is or not Wiccan, about Hulkling, is the context in which it releases, which, spoiler alert, does
It
relate pretty
involved
heavily
a
to
coconut
Wiccan.
tree.
It does actually relate pretty heavily there. So the reason I say this is because there are a bunch of decks right now that have 2 or more 6 drops in them. And it's not really necessarily clear what the absolute best ones are. The wiki
Mhm.
decks have usually like Ultron and Eliath. There is an Eliath in basically every single deck that is playing Arishem, but it's playing alongside Mockingbird, things like that. Sandman decks are Ultron Red Hulk or Ultron Eliath, depending on how it looks. And there is like a bit of flexibility there. I have Wiccan decks that are playing, Magento and Eliath, right? Like it's not always the same thing. There's like a Eliath Doctor Doom. There are multiple combinations of multiple similarly powered 6 cost cards where it seems like the major thing you're actually getting out of them that really determines which one of them is the one you're playing is your opponent's not going to be playing around that specific one. And Hulkling brings this dynamic to a real crescendo because it is 100% impossible to play around the card Hulkling because you don't know what it says. And so
Very
you end
true.
up in situations where like your opponent is snapping a Hulkling leader and you just die to that. You have absolutely no outs, and why would you even expect that to be a card? And so you end up with this card that has a similar profile to a lot of the things people really dislike about Arishem. Oh, they generated this card. I could have never possibly played around it. That sucks. Hulkling could be that card. It's just it could also be bad. And when there are so many decks looking for just 6drop.com, where you just like you put whatever in there and it really doesn't really matter. It's just like it's big and does something good. I do wonder if this is, at least right now, a reasonable meta for Hulkling. Let's talk about the not so big bad Loki, currently a 3/5 that draws a card and discounts the deck that you are drawing from for the rest of the game. Kind of a ridiculous number on this guy. I think that this card is very clearly the best card in the game for me, and very much so the kind of thing that deserves a nerf. And I'm personally regretful of saying that because, we know how I feel about Loki, right? But I also don't want to fall into the content creator thing of like, make a video about deck, realize deck is broken, start complaining about deck gets nerfed, everyone who watched my video gets screwed over because they invested in deck. I do think that, like, at this point, to me, it's fairly clear that Loki is above what he should be. But I'm interested to know what effect you think he's having on the metagame and exactly how.
Yeah, I do. I kind of love the new Loki. I think that it's a very fun card to play.
Hmm.
Because you don't really. It's a cool splash card, right? I mean, like I actually feel very vindicated about when the first announcement for Loki first came out. I put out like a video saying like Loki's gonna be maybe better. And I feel like I got shit on when I said that, and then slowly over time, people have just started throwing Loki in more and more decks and being like, "Man, dude, you just have this one card in it. It's a 3/5. You play it for
Mhm.
great value. If you already have like your win condition in your deck, then you could just find theirs too." And it's just a really really cool splash card. And I think the biggest problem with it right now is that there's no tempo loss. Like the
Yeah.
fact that it's a 3/5 is crazy, dude. Like the fact of how much it does as a 3/5. Like at least with old Loki, you had to build your deck completely around it. You don't have to do anything to play with Loki right now. You literally need no
Yep.
setup and no cards to play around with it. It's just kind of like an extra card that you can play. It's really good on turn like 5. Like I love Loki on 5, where like you don't really know what you're going to do on turn 6. You know, you have like maybe a 3 cost or a 4 cost in your hand. You know you're going to want to play, but then you play Loki on turn 5, and then you get like 2 more cheaper options that can just kind of like blow out your opponent. That's really really cool. So I think that it might be the best card in the game. I think that that's a very fair assessment for you. Crazily, I still think it's like White Widow. I think White Widow
Mm,
has kind of just been this card that
she's
is
great.
just like, how do you? Every deck I want to put her in, but yeah, I mean, Loki can just kind of fit into anything. I think that if we're gonna try and like nerf it and adjust it, I just think it has to have some level of tempo loss to it. Like a 3/3 Loki, I think really
Mhm.
changes how the card feels, and it's not just something you can play on turn 6, because like even now as a 3/5, being able to just huck 5 power on turn 6 is great, right?
Yep.
So I love the card. I don't want to see its effect nerfed or it to be more expensive, but I would love to see the tempo, some tempo loss associated to put it in line with some other cards.
I think the thing that really strikes me about what you said is it's a card you can play after you have your win con to get their win con too. And like that's what differentiates it from old Loki, because old Loki was a card where you like there were often times where you're like, man, do I even really want a Loki here? I have my Shang-Chi in hand and I know that's going to be really important. And Loki, like new Loki actually just removed all of that tension. When do you want a Loki? When your hand is good. Also, sometimes when your hand is bad. Like when do you want a
Yeah,
Loki? Pretty much all the time, right? Like
yeah,
I'm never actually opposed to playing a 3/5. It's usually just the right thing to do. Like there are very few scenarios where it's like you need to be 100% sure that you like have the card you're looking for in your deck and that you are fairly likely to draw it and that like it is the only way you win that game, because otherwise you might as well just play Loki. So what they did was this was a card that was in my opinion extremely skill testing, a card that you had to figure out if it was a good idea to play and then put together all the puzzle pieces you got into a reasonable and powerful game plan over the final 2 turns of the game. It is no longer that. It is a free include in any deck that is doing things, and then you just do the things you were already doing and also some cheaper stuff too. And so you end up with a card that is just sort of wholly better than everything it competes with.
Well, let me ask you this, because I mentioned I would like to see it changed by just having
Mm,
tempo loss. I would love to see a 3/3 Loki. I think
sure.
that's a good starting place. Do you feel like a 3/3 Loki would still be just as impactful, or is that where you want to see? Or if you were to change it, or wanted to change it, would you like up like get rid of the draw? What would you do, I guess?
I would go a little bit further than you. I would
Hmm.
think that I would want this card to be 3/4 no draw.
3/4 no draw. Okay.
That's where I'm at with it. I think 3/4 upside ability. I don't think we can do 3/5 no draw. I don't. That feels like might still be a little too strong. So I would do 3/4 no draw with this card, I think. As someone who is known for unique decks and focusing on, I mean, like you do the off meta report, right? Like this is a sort of niche that you have carved out for yourself. Do you find, I know a lot of high level players complain a lot about Arishem, about Loki decks. I know because they're my friends and I see it all the time. And I'm kind of wondering what it's like for someone who is not focused on beating those decks, but surviving those decks and like existing in a world where those decks exist, rather than saying, I need to be able to play something that is better than that. What does that do to your process in terms of deck building?
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I think most times I go into building decks, it is just to like survive and feel competitive, because there's no, it's very hard. There's been some decks I've put together that can have like a 40% win rate and maybe have like really high cube rate with big splashy stuff. But when you're losing like a lot,
Yeah.
And I feel like I've gotten very skilled in Marvel Tap, especially with like playing off meta type stuff. I've developed like a very strong skill from doing it for so long. But when you're stuck in a position where trying to make certain cards work is just like this awful experience where you're just losing over and over and over again, and you feel like there's no way to break it. That could be really rough. And I feel like that kind of shines in like cards that I hate the most that some people don't care about. Like
Mm.
the one card that like of forever that I actually truly hate, even though it's not even close to the power level it used to be, is Mobius, man. I cannot stand
Yeah.
when I'm trying
Yeah.
to like play and build like an interesting or cool Sarah or like Mr. Negative deck, and Mobius is like a popular in the meta, right? And I feel like most people don't really care about stuff like that because you can just you can build around it. But like what I'm more worried about is like things that like restrict me from being able to do what I want to do. So like metas that have very oppressive like decks where you don't really give your opponent many options can be really hard.
It's like Profex
Um,
Cannonball.
Profix Cannonball type stuff, or just things where the power output they have is just like so consistent, so much higher than any kind of run of the mill deck would do. Like you'd think about like original Zabu or something like
Yeah.
that, or and that one also had oppressive elements with the old Spider-Man things and everything like that. But I mean, I think that right now we're in a pretty good spot for deck building. I feel like there are a lot of just kind of high power level, kind of like middle range cards in a lot of different slots. You know, like in the 2-drop slot now, you're looking at things like Kate Bishop and White Widow that we talked about before. I think White Widow's crazy. You have these tools like Nocturne and Copycat and Cast Nova, and still you can still play like things like Red Guardian, which people forget that you can
Good
play, and
card.
it's so crazy because Red Guardian's such a strong card, right? But there's so many other options. So I think that meta is like right now where there are a lot of kind of competing high power level cards that you can use as like a structure and then build like kind of some spice around it. I think makes like where we're kind of like settling into right now pretty good. And having cards that are kind of like one card type win conditions like Loki really can help those as well, because even though you're kind of doing the spice of like a different kind of deck, you still have this you can kind of raise the floor with some of these just high power cards to make things a lot of fun, and keep allowing you to have that creative level of playing things that are different while still being able to compete.
Yeah, I think that like one of the weird things about this metagame is it's extremely diverse if you just look at a deck you can play without feeling embarrassed. But at
Hmm.
the very top, it's extremely not diverse, right? Like you can do a lot of stuff if you just want to be able to be like, I'll go like 55% and do pretty well, right? Like if this is a deck that if I get on a good run with it, I can do well with it, right? I won't guarantee 55% win rate with anything because that's ridiculous, but like I could be on a good run with this. I could play like 30 games at 55% with like Destroy or whatever, right? There's even arguments for like decks like Destroy where it's like this is a deck that is not good to Loki into a lot of the time and pretty good against Clog stuff. Like there are contextual things that like make these decks rise and fall. Decks like Destroy and Wong have been on my tier list for months, right? And they change depending on the metagame. Wong worse right now because there's so much Clog. Destroy better right now for the same reason. And you end up in these situations where I feel like people focus so hard on the perfectly optimal thing. And if you're not playing that, it's bad. And it's like, to some degree, that's true, but only if you're playing against other people who are playing the perfectly optimal thing. Like, you're only going to be bad in the context of, like, you're in top 10, you don't own Cassandra Nova, you run into an RSM gamer, you shrug your shoulders and probably get run over, right? Like,
Hmm.
that's when it really matters. And I think that people focus too much on when that competitive advantage from having the best possible option actually ends up mattering, because I think it really starts mattering to a great degree a lot higher up than people think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about like high floor versus higher low floor versus higher low ceiling, and how like a lot of people look at the meta and see like, oh, high are like the strongest decks? Like, are
Yeah.
there a couple decks that are pretty significantly higher? And then like a low ceiling meta, a lot of people really like because there's a lot of kind of decks that fit right on that top precipice.
Yeah.
But I'm much more focused on like the floor. Like, is the floor high enough with like these random cards? And honestly, I mean, if you're someone like me, and I joke about this a lot, like, you know, you can hate on Arisham all you want. For someone like me, Arisham is a literal dream card. Like, it is a powerful card that allows you to play random stuff that you
And
never
have it be
expect to
good.
have in
Yeah.
a deck and have it be good because you have this advantage. So like I feel like for people like me, even now, like Arisham is such like a treat to be able to play right now because you can play all these different things. I joke a lot that if I wasn't a content creator, I would just play Arisham. Like if I didn't have to like create these decks and do YouTube content and different things like that and have a love for doing that for my job, I would probably just play Arisham because it's a really fun and diverse thing. So it's just really cool to think about all these different aspects of the meta as to what actually makes it fun based on what you're trying to get out of Marvel Snap. Because one thing that a lot of people don't think about is that other people you're playing against want different things out of the game. Some people just really like winning and get a lot of positivity from winning and feeling dominant. Some people just like to play weird, flashy, cool, interesting things, and some people like just like to like have these competitive and unique experiences while playing it. So looking at like the full variety of what people like is always interesting when looking at meta as opposed to just the very top.
In relation to that, one of the things that I've been noticing as a trend in the metagame lately is the angle that other decks seem to be taking against these Wiccan, Loki, Arishem energy cheat type decks, because they manage to be energy cheat decks without really going out of their way to do that. Like the sacrifices they're making are like, I play Maria Hill. It's like, wow, you've really gone out of your way to enable that Wiccan over here. Great job. And so you end up with these like very powerful tempo decks that just get this energy for free. And so the way to combat that is not by trying to outnumbers them in a fair way, because you're not going to be able to do that, but instead by combating their board space. They still only have 12 of those. They can cheat their energy as much as they want. If they can't use it the right way, they're not going to be able to win. And that angle to me, like, it reminded me of you, where it's like, okay, I'm looking at a metagame where top deck is deck A. It is going to be better than what I make at doing the thing that it does. How do I find another angle to try to take that down? Do you have any experiences of that nature to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like junkie type stuff is great, and it's something I have been playing a lot, and I find to be really good at kind of like um you know, it's like it's like in, you know, me and you both watch the UFC. It's like when
Mm,
people talk about in fights, it's like if I fight their game, I'm gonna lose. But if
right.
I can bring them down and make them play my game,
Yes.
like it's gonna be a scrap, and you can do some things. So if you can do some really like creative call outy stuff, and clog like a lane in like a really kind of nasty way, or you know, kind of push a lot of pressure on turn 5 on a lane that maybe that they didn't expect, to put them into a very uncomfortable position on turn 6. You can definitely find ways to make things like that happen. And I think that having like especially right now when people are doing a lot of energy cheat, any kind of like junky or restrictive type stuff. I mean, we've seen Sandman come out in
Yeah.
a really awesome way. And a lot of people really hate Sandman. I think that Sandman, like especially now that it can't go multiple turns, is a pretty good it's a pretty good lever. It's kind of like a good like stopgap for the meta. Like when things start to get too out of control, like, oh, I'm gonna play 7 things on turn 6, then your opponent's just like Sandman, no, and you're like, nah, okay, that's fair. You did you that's fair. You put that 5 cost card in
Yep.
your deck. You know what am I gonna do about it?
I
Okay,
lost to that
yeah.
5-6. Okay.
All right, yeah, GG's. Oh, on to the next one. Enjoy your 2 cubes if
Yep.
you're good and you snap before your Sandman like you should have, right? So I think that it's just kind of having those ways of making these decks that can feel oppressive and overly powerful, pull them out of their comfort zones and make them play on your level. And also it's about risk, right? Like if you're a deck that's very unfavored against another deck, you need to play risky. Like you have to be riskier, especially in a conquest perspective, like over a longer term
Oh
game. But
God, yes.
even on ladder, I think it's really important to play riskier. So just know the difference between yourself and those really high level decks. If you're going to be playing things that are off meta or not the best decks, try and bring them down to your level, and then also know when you have to be very very risky to squeeze those big ones out and when to pull away for just 1 or 2 cubes.
One thing I think that people are really bad about when it comes to like risk evaluation with clog stuff is like, if you don't land this clog, are you gonna win the game? Like, sometimes you just have to go for the green goblin and say, if they fill it up, I'm gonna lose. Like, if you don't land this clog, are you gonna win the game? Probably not. So you have to go for it, right? And when I think about
Mm-hmm.
this a lot, when I think about the Ajax clog deck that Yo Woody put together, which had a hobgoblin in it. And it never performed well because nobody played hobgoblin well. Because the way you have to play hobgoblin in that deck is so risky. You have to be so risky with it, or you have to set up ghost spiders and iron fists with it, or you have to set up grapple arrows with it. And all of those are like fairly intricate that people don't really think about a lot, right? And so it ended up being this card that every other build of the deck had higher stats. And I think a lot of that is just because it's really scary to fire off a correct hobgoblin because it's really bad for you if it doesn't work. But it's really the game if you do manage to pull it off. And when we talk about playing risky, there are matchups where it's just like, if I don't hit this, I'm gonna lose. So I might as well know now on turn 5 before the stakes double.
100%, man. Those moments are they're really hard to do in Marvel Snap
Mm-hmm.
of I'm going to do this thing, and if I miss, it will look stupid and it will look like
Very.
I got eviscerated.
Yeah.
But there's no difference between getting eviscerated and then just going to the next turn and retreating anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't matter if you're gonna not take this risk and this clog, you're gonna do something that's kind of whatever. They get into a position where they can't win on turn 6. You're retreating anyway, so take those shots, have that conviction, because it once you get over like the bad feeling that you'll get and realize that it's just the same as being really passive, the positive like endorphin hits you'll get when you make those risky plays and they pay off every once in a while is 100% worth it, and you will love the game a lot more by doing it.
You sound like a drug dealer for like playing like this.
Come
So
on, man.
check out
Come
the
on, man.
positive
Come on,
endorphin hits, bro.
oh man, oh,
Opens a
go.
trench coat of just like launching hobgoblins at full lanes. Like
Oh
just
man.
videos of hobgoblins not moving. So Binks asked me to put this section on here. I am a huge pushover, so I did. I don't exactly know what he's getting at, though, so I'm going to toss this one over to him to introduce. Wiccan builds.
So I wanted to talk to you about like choices within Wiccan decks, because I played Wiccan a lot really early, and I think that
Mhm.
there was an insane amount of experimentation that was going on in how you want to build a Wiccan deck. And I think that Wiccan introduces 2 problems. The first problem is consistently activating Wiccan, so having enough 1, 2, and 3 drops to be able to consistently fill curve and to be able to play them on 4. The second one is having enough things to do and ways to actually leverage getting the Wiccan
Yeah.
power build. Like that, it's a big kind of like 2-part puzzle to build Wiccan decks. And I think that honestly, like I was a little bit busy with things this week. I was gone for like the whole weekend, so I feel like I wasn't really able to dig in and kind of key out exactly what I felt was best, as far as like, do you want to do a Quicksilver or a Domino and like push like 3 or 4 of the other ones? Do you just want to do like 3 to 4 ones, 3 to 4 like 2 drops, a couple of 3s so that you can get it activated? I'm more just interested in because I've seen you really experimenting with Wiccan and talking about these different ways that people are building Wiccan. I'm more interested in hearing like your expertise of like what you think the optimal Wiccan builds will do to solve those 2 problems of getting it consistently while still having tools to use after it's on.
I think that they pretty much actually, and this is going to sound weird, they look like Sandman decks, where your end game is just like a couple 6s, and then there are 3 cards that I consider invaluable when building a Wiccan deck: Maria Hill, Kate Bishop, Kitty Pryde. And those 3 cards are sort of the backbone of almost every Wiccan deck that I build. I am not a Quicksilver gamer. I am not a Domino gamer, even though I legitimately want to be, because they make you less likely to draw the Wiccan. One of the key things that you need to actually do in order to play Wiccan on turn 4 is have Wiccan by turn 4. And playing Quicksilver Domino means you are less likely to have Wiccan by turn 4. It's unfortunate that these cards affect the math in the way that they do. I do want a Quicksilver Domino deck to be good, probably more than most people. I love being like a dumb curve out deck. It's one of my favorite things in the entire world.
You were an early Chavez supporter.
I
You were
love it.
very, very strong early Chavez
I
supporter.
love dumb curve out decks. It's my favorite thing. I want to play Murloc Paladin forever. All right, I want to play one card on every turn of the game. That's what I want. But right now, the way the game demands I act is in such a way as to use Wiccan as a support piece to an otherwise functional strategy. My two best Wiccan decks, Loki Wiccan and then the Lady Deathstrike Wiccan that Yo Woody cooked up there, all sort of built on the same formula. There are 3 1-drops. The 1-drops either put a card back into your hand or return to your hand, so it's like Hood, Maria Hill, Kitty Pryde, things like that. There are multiple 2-drops, usually 3 of those, including Kate Bishop, who is going to basically guarantee that if you have any 1-drop in Kate Bishop, she makes it happen, right? And so between those cards, you get to basically have a normal early game, or a very close facsimile of a normal early game, not really sacrifice anything in terms of consistency or power, because let's say you don't play Wiccan, you don't play Loki. Okay, you're still Thena-ing them. You're still Thena Angela Kittying them. It's whatever. You're still doing something good. It's not the best thing in the world to give up on your final turn Thena because you wanted to play Magneto. But like, we've had metagames where like that was just the thing you did anyway. Just curve Thena stuff out into Magneto. It's fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. And so you end up with a deck that is good, can activate Wiccan most of the time, and isn't paying a price for that. And even if you are paying a price that, like, you miss a 1-drop is like the most common way to avoid activating Wiccan, because the 1-drops are so good at like filling up the curve up to 3. He's still a 4/7. You're fine with a 4/7 and a Kitty Pryde on turn 5. You're good with that. You don't hate that at all. And so that's how I've approached Wiccan deck building. Almost all of my decks that you see Wiccan in are going to be built along those lines. I realize this is like maybe a week early, but I wanted to do a little bit of a season retrospective because there were some surprising cards for me this season. I think Wiccan was by far the most surprising, but Speed is a card that is an absolutely competitive at every level 3-drop right now. This is arguably one of the best 3s in the game just on numbers, even though it does nothing other than numbers. It is just the best numbers at the spot. Always usually a space for that in a metagame. There are also cards like Kate Bishop, who, if you ask me, is the best 2-drop in the game. Like, you name-checked White Widow earlier. I think Kate's better. And I am just an enormous fan of Kate Bishop. She's in so many of my decks right now. Basically everything that I play involves her at this point. When you look at this season, I think a lot of people will look at it and be like, this was a pretty unexciting season. At least that was the expectation going in. Coming out of it, I feel like there was kind of a lot that happened here, actually, in a way that I was surprised by.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it also, like, the Loki change happened in between, and I
Sure.
think that the Loki change kind of, like, I feel like changed how a lot of decks are running, and the Loki change really kind of supported cards like Kate Bishop and Wiccan, and just like, I'm gonna play a lot of quite good stuff type things. I mean, I think Kate Bishop's amazing. I still think White Widow's better. I personally think that just like 2-drop that junks your opponent's side is
It's pretty
so
wild.
annoying, so insanely good. But then Kate Bishop 50% of the time get freaking Acid Arrow, which is just the most ridiculous card. I was saying that I was on a Kate Bishop train super early. The moment I saw that card, I'm like, beep. If anyone doesn't think this card is going to be everywhere, you're out of your damn mind, dude. Like, it's a big reason why I love Mirage too, and I've been playing Mirage still because, like, I think that people forget that cheap resources are better than expensive resources. Like cards that add expensive resources into your hand, there's a huge cost to playing them. When you're adding cheap resources into your hand, there's a lot of times while you're playing Marvel Snap, you float 2 energy in a turn just because it's best. If you have cheap resources in your hand that you can get value out of that extra energy that you're spending, you're basically not spending energy on them, is the way that I think about it. It's actually why I liked old Maria Hill quite a bit, the 2/3 that added a random 1 cost, because it's kind of like I mean, dude, like think about
It's
it though.
kind
It's
of
kind
like
of
a
like a
bad,
bad
yeah.
Kate Bishop,
It is
right?
kind. I think
Like,
the operative word there is kind of and bad, but like,
well,
yeah,
but like I feel like I mean, think about it. Like you're adding one good one cost, whereas Kate Bishop is adding
right.
two good one
I
costs,
think
right?
I think
Like
the actual comp you want to make is Kitty Pride, where it's like you're
Kitty Pride.
never losing energy. You're almost
Mm-hmm.
always gaining power on either Angela or Athena or Kitty, and so you're
Mm-hmm.
always efficiently using every part of your turn. And that's what Kitty Pride
Sure.
brings, I think.
Yeah, yeah, especially in a deck where you're running like Angela and Thena and stuff like that. Where we're in that like very because I don't look at Kitty Pride as much as a lot of people because I don't really have that
Interesting.
like full package into a lot of decks, and I feel like Kitty Pride is very restrictive with the extra cards you have to add with her
Yeah.
to make her effective. She
Yeah.
kind of really puts you down a lane. But yeah, I think that's a really really good comparison. So I think Kate Bishop has done a lot of really good things. I don't know if they're going to bring her down in power level. I
Mm.
mean, it's hard because she's like a fun card. I think a lot of people really like. Maybe the acid arrow shouldn't be -2 or something. The acid arrow could probably be 0 power
It
and
would
be like
literally be
good,
good if it was a rock.
right?
Like
Like it
it
would just
would,
be good at 0 power,
yeah.
which is kind of crazy. I think that's maybe the only one that should get touched. So I think that those are really good. Speed is interesting. Speed is just interesting because it just it's just like a gladiator, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when Gladiator was first buff to a 3/8, and people were just like, I mean, I'm getting 8 power on my 3 drop. It's pretty good because that's
It's pretty good.
basically what you get with speed, right? It's
Yeah.
pretty much just always almost always a 3/8. It's kind of weird how consistent it is. I took it as it's just more of a spectrum card, but because like I felt that it was probably going to be more a 3/7, and I felt like a 3/7 wasn't going to be enough. But now that it's like now you can see it's like almost always a 3/8. It's pretty good. But overall, just a lot of and we were talking about this before, cards that are just very good in a lot of different decks that kind of rise the floor of different decks by having these good options into them. I'm super for it, and I think that this season did a really, really good job of adding those.
I almost feel like Marvel Boy is this card that like we don't talk about because his role was so obvious and apparent. But I learned a lot from Marvel Boy, which is basically like they can kind of do whatever they want in Zoo and it won't be busted. Like you can make any card as long as it only affected one drops, you're fine. Like you can
Yeah,
do
there's just like
whatever.
I mean, Killmonger is just such a
Yeah.
crazy valve, you know.
It's honestly unbelievable that we're
Completely
like
forgot Marvel
we're
Boy
gushing over speed like a 3-9, and Marvel Boy is over here like I'm a 3-14, but because
360. Yeah,
it's just
crazy.
like he's just a zoo card, so it's like whatever, who cares? Like,
Yeah,
it's fine,
whatever.
it's
Good.
balanced, it's whatever. So let's talk about pet cards. I think this is like a more operative thing for you because I don't necessarily have pet cards. Like, as much as I like to joke about being a Loki cultist and all of that, I play Loki
Hmm.
because it's good. And when it's not good, I don't play it. Like, it's not like I love the specific game type of Loki. I like it. It's good. I like taking game actions and having things matter and generally feeling smart. I like all that stuff. Yeah, no, that's why I play card games instead of chess because if the better player always won, I'd lose a lot. So like there's something to the idea of like I have a preferred play style, but really it typically just involves like when I look at like the cards that are my pet cards, Werewolf by Night, Thena, Angela, my pet cards are early scalers. My pet cards are all, to use a
You've all
Magic the Gathering
all their ace
analogy, yeah, no, they're all just like Tarmogoyf. They're all just like my pet card is just like I'm paying 2 energy for this thing that is too big, and then the rest of my deck interacts with you in some way behind the power of the thing that is too big, that is providing the meat for me to do whatever else I'm doing around it. And so like those are I think the kind of decks that I enjoy the most, where it's just like I have this backbone of whatever, and then the game plan is sort of grafted onto that from there. Like, oh, I'm a Darkhawk deck. Like, are you really? No, I'm Athena deck, but I play the rock stuff in here, right?
Hmm.
That's what I think my pet cards are. These like early scaling, big, beefy, invest in me and I will pay you off type of cards. That's what I like.
That's all. Yeah, I always think of you when I think of like Angela. I feel like
Yeah,
you were like one of the very early
that's my
Angela, and
girl.
then like back when Bishop was.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it crazy that Bishop hasn't gone back to a 3/2? By the way, isn't it crazy?
It
That
is a
was so
little
long
weird,
ago.
yeah.
Um, but well, I guess with Ramona around so much, like Bishop might even be better as a 3/1. Weirdly
That's
enough.
never ever happened. That has never happened. That is
I
a
know, I know,
fake
I know,
thing.
I know,
I
I know, I
hate
know, I
you.
know,
You
I
were
know, I
there.
know,
You
I know.
remember when people were saying they buffed Angela and Bishop and Mr. Negative. You were there 3,000 years ago when Isildur failed to throw the ring into Mount Doom.
Or like when a 9 power goes to a 10 power, like, oh well, they
Shang-Chi!
nerfed this card, they nerfed this card. Uh, yeah, I know. Let's get back to 4/8 crossbones. That card was good.
Hell
Um,
yeah.
I feel like I have a few pet cards that I like try and find ways to fit into decks. One that's recent is Cersei, man. I love
Ooh, that's a
Cersei.
good pet card to have.
Cersei's such a beautiful, amazing card, and I feel like people. It's cool that she's powerful too because she's a damn strong card. When the stats show up, it's one of those cards that is like that risk assessment type card, kind of like what we were talking about earlier,
With the
where like you
Hobgoblin,
have to,
yeah.
yeah, you have to know when you're playing your Cersei and like how risk averse you have to be. If you're just like yeeting it into this lane that's gonna fill it and be like, it just has to reach this threshold or I lose,
Yep.
and we're just gonna do it and we're gonna figure it out. But I just find her to be like an amazing, amazing card. Another one is random Heim Doll. Even
Not like
tonight I'm
putting him
gonna
in your
play it.
deck, just like randomly generating him.
No, 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 putting them in your deck. Like
Oh, 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 oh,
having a
okay.
random Heimdall added into your deck. Like there's a deck that I'm actually playing a new version of this deck called Hog Sea, which stands for Heimdall Octopus Good
I
Cards.
remember Hogsea.
And essentially what you used to want to do in Octopus would take all the cards is that you'd play Octopus on right on 5, pull all their cards, fill it up, and then you'd play like Heimdall left, and then you'd pull the Octopus on anything that was right, and you'd really fight for 2 lanes. So I think that having that Heimdall juke, it was something that I found kind of early in Snap, back in like way early beta, like 2 years ago, back when like we were still figuring out our pool 1 pool 2 cards and getting into pool 3. There wasn't like too much that you could do in pool 1 and pool 2. It was like you can play on reveal, or you can play the Spectrum deck, or you can play you can play the Devil Dinosaur deck. Like there's like 5 different like very straightforward archetypes you can do. But I was like, dude, you could just play Heimdall on like a deck and just like dive juke people and have like an amazing time. So like random Heimdall is another one that has just kind of like always been there for me. I think the last one is Legion. Um
Hmm.
Legion's such a good card that no one plays outside of Arisham right now. And I think that people are still underplaying an Arisham, even though now, especially with Doc Ock and Leech kind of not competing for it in the 5-drop slot anymore. Now, most people have come around to being like Legion should be in a lot of these decks. I think that Legion is just one of the most unbelievably fun scam cards and just leads to some of the most explosive, crazy plays that you can see in any of Marvel's Snap, which is just a beautiful thing to see.
Speaking of things that are beautiful to see, I'm going to start trying to do my penance for making a Loki video and then saying Loki should be nerfed by talking about some cards that I think should be buffed. I'm actually going to start with a card that Binks just mentioned as one of his pet cards, so I'm not expecting a lot of resistance on this one. I think Cersei could be a 5/8.
Ooh. I think 5/8's completely fine for
Yeah.
her, right? I think that it completely puts her in line. I don't think that she's really based around like her end power that she has, but it certainly makes her feel better when you're just playing her on like one card, which you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of sometimes have to do. I would love Cersei. I think that Cersei's like it was really interesting when she came out because I feel like everyone thought she was trash
Yeah,
before,
it was
like was like, oh,
weird.
this card's gonna suck, and then everyone started playing her with like the junk stuff, and it's like, holy crap, dude, we have a second win condition for junk, and then there was like a huge wave of junk that started like just murking everyone. But yeah, I would love to see her as a 5/8. I think that's great. um what about what would you do to buff a card that
Hmm.
used to be the 2-drop menace, that when you see it dropped on 2 you would be mad, that now has been so outshined? What about Scorpion?
Oh man. I mean, Scorpion I think is just very easy. You can make that a 2/3 at this point.
I think it's
When
fair,
when
yeah.
you compare it to something like Jeff or when you compare it to something like Kate Bishop, I think it's very easy to see its ability in line with those cards. I think Scorpion, when we talk about like things like why Scorpion fell off, I think that is actually a numbers game. It's not that
Hmm.
Affliction became less relevant, it's just that Scorpion ended up being a smaller 2-drop than the other things that you'd be able to play. And I also think, here's my other take though, I wouldn't buff Scorpion. Because if
Interesting.
that card, which you get for no effort, is going to be comparably strong to something like Angela or Thena, which you put a lot of effort into, I think that would actually be bad. I think it was bad when Scorpion was just like a card that everyone was happy to play, because it just ends up in a situation where this card that you do nothing for is comparable to the cards your opponent are putting in effort for. And I think that is not the type of thing I would want to do. Third and final reason is I don't think that minus oneing your hand is fun for people. I think people viscerally negatively react to that. And so I
Sure.
think that I would much rather have the dominant 2-drops in my game be like the ones that let you do cool stuff like Kate Bishop, or the ones that are so totally inoffensive that nobody could get mad at them like Jeff. Those are the ones that I feel like should be the Scorpion-ish cards.
Sure. I think Scorpion could be cool too if it kind of like, maybe what if it gave like one card -3 or -4, where you sting one card. I could see that kind of being like interesting,
Ooh.
or having some cool aspect to it where it feels more impactful because I don't know, it's just like interesting. It just feels like it's pretty much only run in some, not even a lot of them anymore, some like abomination high evo decks, and it's
Yeah.
just like gone from everywhere else. And then you see something like Cassandra Nova, which basically does the same thing but is like a super high powered card. And I feel like people forget, I think the reason Cass is actually good is because of the effect she has on the deck. And I think it's like weird because like she obviously Arishem,
Yeah, I'm
like,
pretty sure it's
don't
cute because
get me
she's like
wrong.
a 320.
Don't get me wrong, it's also Arishem, right? But like I feel like the
Right.
reason that she's so good in every other game
Right.
is because you not only get like the 3/7 or the 3/6 that you get out of her, but also it's like you kind of get these like very small little added effects that you don't feel. It's kind of like the Iceman hit. Like you don't really
Yes.
feel like you're hurting them with Iceman, and it's the same way you don't really feel like you're hurting them with the -1s on the deck. But it actually does have a pretty important effect on like how they can do their turn 5 and 6 with the cards they draw, which is interesting.
Yeah, I do think that people underrate how impactful Cassandra's effect on the deck can be. I also kind
Mhm.
of think though that she'd be roughly the same play rate with or without it, where it's like it does matter, but also in a world where RSM exists, you'd be playing the card anyway. Like even if
Yeah.
she wasn't minusing, even if she was literally just she gets the power of however many cards are in your opponent's deck when you play her, you'd probably be playing her anyway just because that card exists and because Loki exists. Because it's like, when people are playing non-RSM Loki, Cassandra on that turn without priority is a banger,
Oh
absolute
yeah.
monster of a card. It's like 311 is pretty damn good. Like that's a really good thing to get. And so I agree that it matters. I think it legitimately does matter a lot, but I also think that the metagame right now has the two defining cards in it are
Mhm.
cards that make your deck bigger. It's the Viagra metagame. We're in,
Yeah.
we're
Big deck meta.
yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
the big deck meta, man. Yeah, I think I agree with. I think the player would be good, but maybe it would be nice because then it would make the win rate go slightly down against
Mhm.
non-Arishan decks and like a small percentage. I don't know. I think it would be. I do think that getting rid of that is kind of interesting an idea for Cass. I think maybe they should consider it. Do you have any cards
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
what's
I've
another
got
card you
I've
want to talk
got
about?
several. I
Let's
would
go.
like to push either a Tuma or Crossbones or Typhoid Mary or all three to 412. I just want to see what
Oh,
happens. That's actually just I just want to see what happens. I don't know.
absolutely ball type beat, dude.
I don't know what would happen. I don't think they'd be that good. And so if I think like just gut check looking at this, I don't think they'd be that good. I think we could probably just do that. Like especially a Tuma, which is just total ass. I think you could make it a 412. I think Crossbones is the most dangerous of those to make a 412 because he's the
Hmm.
least like the most that is like an explicitly snowbally card. You kind of want to stay away from that if you can. But Atuma is asking you to fulfill a quest and currently not providing the payoff that would be needed for it to be a good card when you fulfill the quest of like zeroing it or armoring it, right? I
Yeah,
think
I mean
Atuma and Typhoid
the problem is
Mary.
Magento with the tumor, right? Like the problem is Magento. Anytime that has any kind of like prevalence, like playing a Tuma is just like you will lose if they play Magento at the right time.
Or like
I
White
feel like
Widow, Acid Arrow,
yeah,
Debris,
yeah.
a lot of stuff.
Yeah, usually it's armor is 0, right? Because like
Yeah.
you're never just playing it to hope that it sticks on a lead by itself unless you're the psychopath, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, crossbones might be a little scary at 412. You know what I'd like about 412 Typhoid Mary is
Mm.
that I don't think that'd be too crazy, and it probably like makes Shuri Sauron
Yeah.
something you start thinking about again, which is cool. I mean, I think that ever since Shuri Sauron got I mean, ever since like the original Shuri nerf where you had to do it on the same lane, Shuri Sauron like just feels like a completely okay deck to have kind of in this like competition for like kind of like the like a mid-level deck. And I feel like it's slowly just kind of crept off and they keep trying to like throw it little bones, I feel like, with like the little like Sauron buffs and stuff that have been happening. So I think that like a big jump to Typhoid Mary gives you like a very like real second option because like it used to feel so bad when you have to play a 420 Typhoid Mary as opposed to like
Sucked.
a 528 Red Skull, right? So playing a 424 Typhoid Mary as your backup Shuri plan could be really interesting. Actually, I love that. I think Crossbones is I think you're right. The Crossbones is the only one that might be a bit of an issue because like I think that if you can just slam like a four, like if you just put a 412 somewhere, you're usually pretty happy.
Yeah. Those are mine. Do you have one more for me? Give me one more and then we'll close it out.
One more.
Yeah.
This one is an interesting one.
Okay.
Valkyrie. What are we doing about Valkyrie, man? This card is very powerful. It has a very swingy effect. I think that from when it came out, I feel like it was kind of bad, and then it's always kind of had moments to shine, but it's never really found like a great place. And like is a 4-3 Valkyrie crazy? Would that be like completely broken? Maybe. What do you think they could do with Valkyrie to make it playable?
Someone asked about 4-3 Valkyrie on one of my most recent hot takes episodes. And my take
Yeah.
was just do it. But don't
Yeah,
be
yeah.
mad
Interesting.
when you make another Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that people have fully thought through 4-3 Valkyrie as something that actually exists in the metagame because it
Hmm.
is Zhu Shang-Chi. It is just really, really strong. I played Sunkeeper Tarim in Hearthstone back when that was a good card. And that is a really powerful effect to have at 4 specifically. And that is
Hmm.
because you are able to mix it in with other meaningful cards on the final turn of the game. You could do Shadow King one lane, get rid of their big guy, Valkyrie the other lane, get rid of their big guy. You could do, and this is the actual horrifying one, Valkyrie Grandmaster. Like, there are some really strong things that a 4-cost Valkyrie would do, and what they would have the effect of is flattening the game. And I realize that's almost literally
Hmm.
what she says, but I think she's a card where it's like, you could do it, but you probably wouldn't like what the end result was because it would be less interesting. It would be flattening the game. It would be everything is 3, so what's got the best ability that's not a 3? It would be everyone plays Luke Cage, so this doesn't happen to them kind of deal, right? Like, it'd be one of those where I think that that would be a bad dynamic to introduce, but if you wanted to make her strong, I think it would work.
Yeah. It's she's a funky one. She's a funky one. But yeah, I mean I would like to see something like that given a try. It's just always so hard. Like maybe once they make like Shang-Chi like a 6-5 or whatever, like what they'll end up making him
Yeah, no, I
probably.
mean that seems about
Uh,
fair. Yeah.
maybe we'll need her time in the sun or something. Who knows?
Yeah, no, 6-5 Shang. That's coming to a game near you. Glenn Jones, I hope you're taking notes. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for making it through that video. Thank you so much to my co-host Binks Plays. Binks, tell them where they can find you. It'll also be in the description.
Yeah, I play different off-meta decks pretty much every single day. I stream live on YouTube and Twitch. I post some stuff on Twitter, and I post some stuff everywhere. But you can find me everywhere. BYNX_plays. And thank you so much for having me, Canvas. I always have an amazing time. This is my third time, by the way. You
It's
said
your
second
third?
earlier. This is my third time. Yeah, man.
Third
I'm the
time
maybe the
on
only
this
third.
show?
Yep,
That's true. You're right. It is
and one
actually
on
your
your other
third
one.
time.
Hey,
Yeah, no, I
man.
know you've been on. I know
And
you've been on the Snapshot. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that. You know, we're actually coming up on the anniversary of me going full time. Like, this is going to come out on the 26th. The 28th
mhm.
is the last time. August 28th last year is the last time I missed a daily YouTube video. And people like you were a big inspiration in being a daily YouTube content creator. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. It's almost, I think it's right about 2 years for me being full time, because it was right at the end of August 2022. I ended up getting laid off from my job, and then was like, frick it,
That's
let's try
exactly
this.
what happened to me.
Yeah. Well,
There you go.
I mean, look how far we come, man. From
Yeah.
just a couple bearded dudes having some fun playing a silly little mobile game in beta,
To
now this is our
exactly the
job.
same thing.
To exactly the same
To
thing.
exactly the same thing. All right. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.